This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Welcome to the Sport and Leisure History Seminar at the IHR. Our speaker this evening is Dr. Stanley Arnold from Northern Illinois University, and he's speaking on African Americans in the Olympics from 1936 to 48, which is part of a wider project that I believe he's completed. Nearly. It's very near completion.
Just starting.
On the history of African Americans in the Olympics from 1896 to 1948. So very happy to welcome you, Stanley, and the floor's yours.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jeff, and I want to thank Dion for helping to facilitate this, and I want to thank everyone for being here. This is on, right? I'm being podcast. Great. Yeah. On a cold August day in 1948, 21-year-old Alice Coachman cleared the beam in the high jump at the Summer Olympic Games in front of 70,000 people, not all that far from here at Wembley. In accomplishing this feat, she became the first African-American woman to win an Olympic gold medal. Recalling the exhilaration of the moment, Coachman later said, and that's not Coachman, by the way, I didn't know I had won until I saw it on the board. Coachman, USA, number 1. Now, this paper examines the rise of African-American women in Olympic track and field competition. Scholar Cindy Himes Gissendamer said that African-American women labor under interlocking systems of oppression, race, class, and gender, and certainly this was the case in sport during this period. However, while the achievements of these athletes are extraordinary, the rising profile of these women relied on a steady stream of support from the black community. This rise to prominence, however, coincided with attempts to place them within the gender norms of contemporary American society. Some of the most ardent critics would also become, the most ardent supporters would also become the most harshest critics. The first, I guess this is okay?
Yeah.
Okay. The first track and field events for women in the United States were held at Vassar College in the 1890s. 22 students participated in the 100-yard dash, the 120-yard hurdle, the running high jump, and the 220-yard dash. By the time of the First World War, women's colleges and co-ed institutions began to sponsor meets. Despite criticism from doctors, moralists, social scientists, and journalists about the physical and moral damages, track and field increased in popularity. By the early 20s, athletic clubs and industry teams were holding meets. The appeal of women's track and field now broadened to include working class women, many of whom emanated from recent immigrant communities. The inclusion of women's track and field by the Amateur Athletic Union, the nation's most powerful athletic body, signaled increasing interest. On the international scene, however, women remain barred from the Olympic Games. Now, not to be excluded from competition, a French sportswoman, Alice Mlia, organized the Women's Olympic Games in Paris in 1922, with 65 women from 5 countries competing in events. After 5 years of protest, the first female track and field athletes were permitted to compete at the 1928 Games in Amsterdam. Betty Robinson won the gold for the United States in the 100 meter at Amsterdam. Now, Robinson had honed her skills in the Chicago area, where the nation's most vibrant women's track and field culture had emerged. Chicago boasted a thriving network of municipal, park district, and school-based programs, which afforded talented young athletes a challenging competitive environment. The growing popularity of women's track and field was evidenced when 10,000 spectators watched 1,500 women compete at the Central AAU meet in Chicago in 1930. One of the city's most prominent runners was a teenager named Theodore Pickett. That's her. Born in 1914, Pickett hailed from Chicago's rapidly growing black community, the South Side specifically. The Windy City had experienced a significant demographic transformation since the teens, as large numbers of Southern blacks escaped disenfranchisement, oppressive segregation, and racist violence. While still in high school, Pickett had distinguished herself as a member of the Chicago Park District's South Park track team. I believe you can see that on her garment. At barely 5'3" and 100 pounds, she bested most competitors, and under the direction of future Olympian John Brooks, Pickett became an outstanding hurdler and broad jumper. By 1931, she was competing and winning on a national level, and most observers argue that she should be considered for the upcoming 1932 Summer Games in Los Angeles. As Pickett rose to prominence, a similar story was taking place in New England. Louise Stokes was born in 1913 in Malden, Massachusetts, and like Pickett, came from a working-class family. She began competing as a high school student and was recruited by a local track club, independent athletic association. In addition to distinguishing herself as a sprinter, Stokes began competing in jumping events. In December 1931, the high school senior tied the world record in the standing broad jump. Both Pickett and Stokes were encouraged to compete at the 1932 Olympic trials at Northwestern University. The trials were closely followed by the black press, which really, during this period, reflected the aspirations of the black community. Stokes easily made a place in the 400-meter relay. Pickett finished third. The black press went to emphasize that this meet was interracial and had a number that both of these women enjoyed a great deal of support from white onlookers and also white officials. Now, this comes at a time of increasing racial tension in the city of Chicago. They both made it to the 1932 Olympic team, the first African American women on an Olympic team. Inclusion on the team, however, did not indicate acceptance. At the Brown Palace Hotel in Denver, this is on their way out to Los Angeles, the two runners were excluded from a banquet held in the team's honor and assigned a room near an upper floor service area. Years later, Pickett recalled, all the other girls had private rooms, went to the banquet, were interviewed by the reporters. Louise and I ate upstairs in the attic on our trays. Although Pickett and Stokes attended all social and press engagements in Los Angeles, they would confront a more serious obstacle when it came to the competition. On August 7th, the 400-meter relay was scheduled. Both Pickett and Stokes had been enthusiastic about running this event. Both had excellent qualifying times, yet both were defeated by white runners, and they had defeated at Northwestern. Although Coach Vreeland, George Vreeland, made the final decision, there had been a closed-door meeting of the United States Olympic Committee right before his decision. Vreeland had received a telegram from the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the country's leading civil rights organization, prior to this decision. So he certainly understood the importance of his actions. Some teammates recounted that he was more concerned about factors such as passing, but Pickett disagreed. In 1984 interview, she maintained that times were different then. Some people just didn't want to admit that Louise Stokes and I were better runners. Now, although they did not participate, their inclusion on the team was a cause for cautious optimism for many African Americans, most of whom were focused on the participation of black male athletes. Now, keep this in mind, this is 1932. This is the depths of the Depression. There is 25% unemployment in the United States and close to 50% unemployment among African Americans. So anything positive is a good thing. I mean, this is a very desperate time. One of the attendees at the game was Cleveland Abbott, a chemistry professor and athletic director at Tuskegee Institute. In 1927, Abbott had created the first black track and field carnival, the Tuskegee Relays, and encouraged female athletes to compete. In contrast to many of his colleagues at other campuses, Abbott believed in the potential of women's track and field, and in the wake of the 1932 Olympics, the prospects of Tuskegee and African American women in track in general would improve. Sorry I don't have a picture yet, but Susan Kahn, historian, argues that the intense media scrutiny of female athletes, such as Mildred Babe Didrikson and Stella Walsh, discouraged white women, especially those from the middle class and upper class, from participating in track and field. Depression-era hardships also contributed to this. This created an opportunity for African Americans to excel, to enter this field, and Abbott would capitalize on this. Both Pickett and Stokes looked forward to the 1936 games and continued to train and compete. The next 3 years would witness the evolution of Stokes as one of the nation's most outstanding athletes. She would retain her title in the 50-meter, won the 25-yard sprint, 100-meter, 100-yard, 200-meter, 220 yards, broad jump, and the high jump, all in amateur competition. Pickett took more time to return to form. In the summer of 1934, Pickett dominated the annual meet sponsored by the Evening American Chicago Daily, winning the 100-meter, 80-meter hurdle, and the broad jump. It was not clear, however, whether American athletes would compete in the 1936 Summer Games. The increasing anti-Semitism of the Nazi regime had sparked calls for a boycott of the Olympics. In summer 1935, a campaign was underway to boycott the Games. Jewish organizations, labor unions, and leftist groups argued that the Olympiad would serve only as a propaganda device for Hitler. The majority of the nation's black newspapers voiced their opposition to the boycott. A few supported it. The ones who supported it believed that it would give Hitler, it would sanction his system. However, those who were against it said that African Americans competing would undermine his Aryan notions, notions of Aryan supremacy. Avery Brundage, the president of the United States Olympic Committee, maintained that political divisions should not affect the Olympics, and boycott plans soon evaporated. Both women qualified at the Olympic trials at Boston University, Pickett being selected for the hurdles and Stokes for the 400-meter relay. Along with Jesse Owens, Ralph Metcalf, and other members of the U.S. Olympic team, Pickett and Stokes traveled to Germany via ocean liner. In contrast to 1936, the two runners were not excluded from any activities. Stokes recalled sitting so very close to Hitler at one banquet. The narrative of the games, the experience of Jesse Owens is well known, yet the experience of Pickett and Stokes has often been cast aside. Titty Pickett became the first African-American woman to compete in the Olympic Games, yet broke her foot in the qualifying run for the 80-meter hurdle. Stokes believed that she would run in the 400-meter relay, but she was denied a berth after another closed-door meeting by U.S. Olympic officials, and in some ways a tragic repeat. It's difficult to ascertain the reasons for the exclusion of Stokes. Her trials were not as good as Pickett's, yet better than many of her white runners. For the black community, most of the focus had been on, however, the experiences of the male runners. This was not covered that well by the African American press. While Pickett and Stokes pondered their future, Abbott increased his efforts. In 1937, the ambitious Abbott established the Tuskegee women's track and field team. He was aware that the rising status of African American athletes, both male and female, had awakened interest outside the South. And he forged links with national organizations. He was inspired by Pickett and Stokes, who had competed in integrated contest, and believed that this exposure had enhanced their performance. Now, Abbott had been hired by Tuskegee founder Booker T. Washington shortly before the latter's death in 1915. Like many African Americans of this period, Abbott was influenced by Washington's notions of self-help and uplift. While these concepts had been practiced by African Americans since the colonial era, Washington, among others, had articulated it in the Reconstruction era and afterwards. Now, in her work on African American women collegiate basketball players in the interwar years, Rita Liberti argues that the strong support network offered by black colleges enhanced both the athletic and career success of female athletes. At Tuskegee, Abbott began establishing a model that would take his program into national and international recognition within a decade. In order to attract the best talent, Abbott arranged for work-study positions for promising athletes. He scoured the nation for the most talented athletes, focusing on the rural South, yet also recruiting from the rising black population of the North. In an era of unrelenting segregation, Abbott knew that creating a supportive community was crucial. In addition to introducing a strict and innovative training regimen, which involved training, co-ed training, he utilized peanut oil, a byproduct of famed Tuskegee scientist George Washington Carver, as a liniment. In order to avoid segregated restaurants as the team traveled throughout the South, Abbott and his family cooked meals for the team beside the roadside when they stopped. Abbott's philosophy seemed to work. By the late 1930s, Tuskegee was a rising force in women's track and field. And now, this is also due to the fact that a lot of white competitors had moved away from track and field. Avery Brundage, for example, declared that he was fed up with women as track and field competitors. He said, I quote, "Their charms sink to less than zero." So there was this opening for African Americans. In contrast, most African Americans embrace track and field for women as a positive, viewing it as a means for racial progress on many different fronts. Edwin Bancroft Henderson, physical education professor and leading expert in African American sport, stressed that the main goal should be health, not competition. But, I quote, there are girls who ought to display their skill and national characteristics to a wider extent. They should be commended and should be viewed within the context of the struggle for black progress. The race of man needs the inspiration of a strong, virile womanhood. However, not all in the black community agreed with these views. Most black colleges during this period established track and field teams for women. However, the two most prestigious institutions, Howard and Fisk, did not. In contrast to the majority of black colleges, these two institutions were based in the liberal arts and trained most of black America's legal and medical community, and drew from the ranks of the small yet significant upper middle class. While these institutions advocated sports for women, these were mainly golf and tennis. Despite the disapproval of some, the Tigerettes began to achieve national recognition. Sprinter Lula Himes was described by the black press as the Jesse Owens of the fairer sex of the cinder path, and was highly touted to medal at the 1940 Summer Games. In addition to Himes and others, Tuskegee was enhanced by the arrival of 17-year-old Alice Coachman at Tuskegee in 1939. Let's see if I can do this. There she is. Born in rural poverty in Georgia, Coachman had established a reputation as a fearless competitor. Enrolling at Tuskegee's high school program, keep this in mind, there are very few high schools for African Americans in the South during this period, because higher education, that is anything beyond 8th grade, is considered useless, since you are expected to be a farm worker, a sharecropper. She was soon dominating competition. Lauded as the Tuskegee Flash by the black press, she became the most outstanding track and field athlete of the World War II era. Now, the Second World War would expose many of the contradictions around race in U.S. society and contribute to the emergence of the modern civil rights movement. During the war, African Americans initiated something known as the Double V campaign, that is victory against militarism and fascism abroad, and victory against racism at home. You can see that you were on one hand asked to fight for democracy, yet denied democracy in your own country. Both the black press, in terms of readership, and civil rights organizations greatly expanded during this period. While the war had forced the cancellation of the 1940 and 1944 Olympic Games, it gave Abbott the opportunity to nourish a stable of runners that would be able to compete on an international scale. Tuskegee had managed to emerge at the forefront of track and field in the United States, and would win a total of 11 AAU titles between 1937 and 1948. While the black press continued to reflect pride in the achievements of the Tuskegee Tigerettes, and all black track and field athletes, female. They were aware that they were ignored at best, or castigated at worst by the white media. The black press began to place the Tuskegee women in a more specific, more gendered female context. For example, in 1941, the Baltimore Afro-American ran a story about the Tuskegee gals, as they were called, about their postgraduate plan. The article detailed the teammates' desires to enter nursing, teaching, and social work. Coachman, now in college, was one of the respondents who mentioned teaching or social work as a possible career, but also stated that her real goal was, quote, being a good wife when she marries. When she marries will probably be the fulfillment of her secret ambitions. Now, while it's easy to criticize the male writers and editors who wrote and approved of these stories, this has to be viewed within the context of the time. Although these women were in fact in the process of constructing their own concept of womanhood, these ideas had yet to really be articulated. In the meantime, as African American women rose in track and field, criticism from the white press and elements of the sports world characterized black women's abilities and successes as a result of their, quote, natural and masculine prowess. At a time when there's a push for integration in America, it's vital for the press to demonstrate that black female athletes were indeed ladies, just as feminine as their white counterparts. For Coachman and many of her colleagues, the principal concern was not the media's opinion of them. Rather, it was the preparation for the next Olympic Games. While Tuskegee remained the dominant force in women's track and field, they faced sisterly yet significant new challenges, mostly from Tennessee State University, another historically black college whose track and field team was coached by Jessie Abbott, Cleveland's daughter. While Tuskegee had a strong squad, after 1946, Coachman graduated. Now, eager to pursue her Olympic and teaching aspirations, she returned to college specifically. Do this. This is a picture of the wartime team, 1941. Coachman is lower right. She returned to college, specifically Albany State College, located in her hometown. This would allow her to compete on the college level to prepare for the Olympics, and also to gain the teaching certificate that she wished. She continued to compete, breaking her old record in the high jump, and by 1947 was eyeing the Olympics. Now, hopes were high for American success in the upcoming games. The Chicago Defender anticipated, said, quote, Negro women will dominate 1948 U.S. Olympic track team. Edward Bancroft Henderson, commenting on the fact that white women held 2 of the 11 slots on the team, suggested that American women, as he said, quote, have been so thoroughly licked over so many years by the Booker T. Washington girls that they have almost given up track and field competition. The efforts of Tennessee State bore fruit when the diminutive Audrey Patterson won a bronze medal in the 200 meter in London. making her the first black woman to win an Olympic medal. However, most American women failed to make the finals. And so hopes were on Patterson. There she is competing for Tuskegee. And there she is. Does anyone know number 2? Dorothy Tyler? Right, from South London. Okay. In drizzling rain, she drew Britain's Dorothy Tyler to win the gold for actually having the fewest misses in the high jump. While the black press had been praising Coachman for years, for the first time, the white press of America finally began to take some notice. The New York Times especially lauded her for of stopping a shutout because there were only 2 medals won by American women in track and field, and Patterson and Coachman won those. The Manchester Guardian, which was a very different paper, I believe, then than it is now, said on August 11th, for the first, the headline is Georgia Parade for Negro. For the first time in history, this South Georgia town will hold a parade for a Negro, Miss Alice Coachman, Olympic champion, who was the first American woman to win a gold medal in field events in London. She won the high jump at 5 feet 6.5 inches, setting up a new Olympic record. Albany State College, which Miss Coachman attends, is planning to send a station wagon to New York to greet her and bring her home. There will be a ceremony at the Municipal Stadium, followed by a banquet and a dance in her honor at the college. What the Guardian did not know, nor did report later, was that this was a segregated victory ceremony. Remember, this is 1948 in the Deep South. Although the mayor of her hometown congratulated her, he refused to shake her hand. There she is. There's the team en route. You can see it is dominated by African American women, and let's see. They went to the White House. Everybody knows who that is in the center, right? U.S. Huh? Yeah. Truman. I found this kind of ironic. Patterson is here. Coachman is here. I found this kind of ironic. I mean, Truman is a bit of a paradox in that he is the first American president to speak at a civil rights organization meeting. He oversees the integration of the U.S. Armed Forces. He's appalled at lynching and racial violence. However, he did, or should I say he had, joined the Ku Klux Klan in the 1920s. He joined it for one morning. He filled out the application material when he was a haberdasher in Kansas City, paid the dues, but then went back before lunchtime because, excuse me, he believed the dues were too high. Not necessarily because he disagreed with the ideas of the...
They don't tell you that when you visit his house in Independence.
No, they don't. No, I've been there. No, I've asked about that. Despite the segregated reception that Coachman received, the 1948 Olympic Games marks an important turning point. While women's track and field was still viewed as a masculine sport, Coachman and Patterson demonstrated that one did not have to be a, quote, muscle mile to compete and win. This was a field that women, and for track and field it would be, in the future, would be overwhelmingly African American women, could compete and win. That is the London Olympic Games, has to be placed with within the context of the other milestones of the growing civil rights movement. That is the integration of the military, the desegregation of professional sports, and the emergence of the idea of racial equality as a political issue. In 1948, the Democratic Party was split three ways, with a very liberal wing supporting civil rights legislation, a rather conservative wing against it, and the main party trying to accommodate just as an aside, I'll wrap this up. I don't know how many people here do oral history in their research. A couple of things. One, doing the oral history of Olympians seems to be not necessarily easy, but Olympians tend to be accessible. I was surprised to find that there are competitors from the 1932 games who are still alive. Now, they're obviously very old, okay, but they're still with us. Partly this is due, I think, to their diet. Their careers, playing careers, are relatively short, and many of them are, in fact, college educated. I believe Dorothy Tyler just died last year, if I'm not mistaken. Of these 6 women, 4 were living this time last year. There are only 2 left. Let's see. Teresa Manuel, and Mabel Walker. Hopefully I'll get to interview them in the extraordinarily near future, okay? But I mean, you can't waste any time with elders. But African American women would continue to excel in Olympic track and field competition. But in the 1950s, we have to look at this within the context of 2 major tendencies. That is the growing civil rights movement and the Cold War, okay, in which at least for America, I grew up during the Cold War. If we win more, simply put, if we win more medals, our system is better. You know, it's as simple as that. Other countries simply don't matter. We have to beat the Russians once they enter Olympic competition after 1952. This is another story that's yet to be told, but probably won't be told by me in the near future because my study ends at 1948. that's about it. I just want to let it open for anybody who wants to take on this topic after 1952 to the present, because I've been asked, why do you cut it off there? And I was like, well, it's, the Cold War and the Civil Rights Movement would take more time to do, and if you want this done, and I just completed a book 2 years ago, it's a lot of work. Okay, I mean, it really is a lot of work. I hadn't realized, but it's a lot of work. Okay, so, but hopefully this will be finished in the near future, the next few years. I'd like to find out more about, as I said, this is a work in progress, what the press, what the public was saying about these African American competitors, not just the women from 32 to 48, but the men from 1896 to 1948 in cities like Paris, in cities like Antwerp, Amsterdam, Stockholm, Berlin, wherever there was Olympic competition. So I'll just leave it with that. I hope people on this side of the Atlantic will be I mean, part of the I'm an Americanist, but I'm trying to broaden my area, so become more of a globalist. I don't know if this will work, but I think track and field might be a way, and certainly the Olympics is a way to do that. So thank you all. Okay.
Thank you, Stanley.
As I said, the work in progress.